Yo, what's up guys? Today we'll be making a tier list of 3 Robin Hood media that we have watched and crashed out over for the past week. Those 3 are Robin Hood, the Dark Forest, aka Zombie Hood, Robin Hood's Great Adventure, aka Anime Robin Hood, and Tom and Jerry, Robin Hood and his Merry Mouse, aka Tom and Jerry Robin Hood. We're going to be evaluating these movies and TV shows based on generic characteristics: acting, action, cinematography or animation, plot, and characters. We're also going to be looking at how they relate to the original Robin Hood folk legends, as well as the values they present. Without further ado, let's get into our first movie, Robin Hood the Dark Forest by Oliver Krekel. To sum everything up, this movie was objectively terrible. From its whopping 3% score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 1.8 out of 10 on IMDb, this movie contains everything needed for a completely horrible movie. So, let's talk about some examples of how horrendous this movie is. To start, it is vital to mention that the movie was originally voiced entirely in German, as the director of the movie was German himself. However, the only version of this movie available in the US is the dubbed version, and the voice actors did not do this movie justice. Immediately, you can tell that the movie was voiced over. The audio is mixed horribly to the point where it blatantly stands out and sounds different from the on-set background noise. The voice actors sound extremely monotone, and there seems to be no effort behind it.
What the hell are you doing?
But that's not all. The acting itself is horrible, and the choreography of the fight scenes seems intentionally slow and unrealistic. Okay, maybe the live action aspect of this movie didn't do it justice, but did it at least do Robin Hood's original stories justice? No. This movie was produced in the 2010s, the era of zombies and supernatural movies, for example The Walking Dead. And so, this movie attempts to create a Robin Hood story, yet there is no similarity to the original stories besides the characters. Not a single authentic Robin Hood story was told, and everything was completely made up. Okay, but maybe some of the values are the same across the stories in the movie. Wrong again. Well, partially. There are some aspects of friendship, loyalty, and romance as seen in the original stories. But the most well-known Robin Hood value, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, is completely vacant. Sure, Martin Thawne, the actor for Robin Hood, brings up the fact that they do steal from the rich and give to the poor, in a very communist-esque fashion. But they never distribute the wealth to the poor, and they keep everything for themselves, which contradicts everything they said previously. You can't just say you're going to do something and then just not do it. Okay, next, let's talk about the plot of this movie. Most of the plot of this movie seems extremely forced, and there's no naturality to it. The only reason why the plot in this movie was even close to expedited was because of magic potions. Robin Hood and his crew sneak into the castle to steal, only because of a person changer potion. Robin Hood is killed and brought back to life by a life potion, but he has to sell his soul in 3 years. Friar Tuck and Will Scarlet are brought back to life after drinking living potions, and all seems well after this. That is, until Maid Marian goes with Robin Hood back to the witch's cave to try to fix the whole selling of us all problem. And while they're gone, the sheriff's men somehow find their camp and murder every single one there, including Robin Hood again. Makes sense. Then, Little John appears out of nowhere and teams up with Maid Marian to steal the undead potion by killing the witch and giving it to all of the murdered merry men. At this point, it's important to bring up that the movie was already an hour and a half in, and the potion of the undead only works within a 24-hour window, to which everyone was somehow already dead for longer. So, in a movie about zombies, the zombies finally appear and start chasing after Marian and John, who have a sack of potions that they stole from the witch. So get ready for an incredibly confusing and bloody 30 minutes of random potions being used against the zombies that have little to no effect on them besides the Trap of Traps potion. This potion supposedly trapped the zombies inside of Sherwood Forest, because that also makes sense, like everything else in this movie. The movie then ends by Marian and John tricking the sheriff into going into Sherwood Forest, where he gets killed, and then Little John becomes the new sheriff of Nottingham. They then hire a witch to make more potions for them, so they can continue to fight the zombies. I am completely lost for words. Overall, this movie is a solid 2 out of 10. This is solely because of the sheer creativity of this movie and nothing else. If you feel like wasting a whole 2 hours of your time by watching an unintentionally funny movie that has nothing to do with Robin Hood, this movie is perfect for you.
Let's summarize this movie with the characteristics we said we were going to discuss at the start. Firstly, the acting. The acting in this movie was horrible. The dialogue was unlively, and it seemed like they didn't even want to be there. Next, the action. I mean, this movie does have action scenes, but none of it is even close to remotely tense, and I felt more confused than nervous while watching. Next, the cinematography. There were some pretty scenes of the characters in Sherwood Forest until you realize how blatantly obvious it is that it's just a green screen. You can tell this movie was extremely low budget, and I don't know where those $2 million went. Next, the plot. As said before, this plot made absolutely no sense, and I feel like I would have understood more if I was deaf and blind. Finally, the characters. This movie did have the original characters, but either killed them off way too early or just made them randomly appear at illogical moments of this movie. Like, where did Little John come from? Where was he this whole movie? The Sheriff of Nottingham could have been on vacation and we wouldn't have known, and Prince John never shows his face once. So much for a Robin Hood movie. But now let's see how some of the other movies did.
Alright, let's move on to Robin Hood no Daiboken, aka Robin Hood's Great Adventure, produced by Tatsunoko Productions, the 52-episode anime that takes the classic legend of Robin Hood and cranks it up to 11, with insane action, dramatic betrayals, and UFOs? Yeah, we'll get into that. So the story starts like this. In the 12th century in Nottingham County, a cruel and greedy baron named Alwine and the corrupt Bishop Hertford raid and burn down the Huntington's castle, leaving Robin and his cousins, Will, Winifred, and Barbara on the run. The Huntingtons then escape into Sherwood Forest where they're taken in by Friar Tuck, a familiar name, right? Who helps them survive in the wilderness. But they actually aren't alone out there, and there's already a gang of young outlaws led by Little John. And the first meeting with Robin is not very friendly, and they get in a full-on brawl over a kidnapped noble girl, Marion Lancaster, who's got a secret family cross that Baron Alwine desperately wants. But of course, since this is an anime, enemies quickly become besties, and Robin and Little John team up to take on the corrupt nobles that ruin their lives. Now, since this is also a TV show, there's an overarching story where Robin and his band of outlaws fight and eventually take down Robin Alwine. But there's also a lot of episodes, like filler episodes in an anime, where they're just kind of doing other stuff. So one of these episodes, or actually a lot of these episodes, pull from classic Robin Hood legends. Like for example, there's just one episode where there's a random outlaw from like a different city who steals from the rich and gives to the poor. Very similar to Robin Hood usually, right? But funnily enough, our Robin Hood doesn't do a lot of direct stealing, and he's more of a protector of the weak, helping people escape injustice rather than robbing nobles blind. But however, there's actually more parallels with other Robin Hood stories in this show. Like how Baron Alwine is inspired by the Sheriff of Nottingham, and also how Prince John takes the throne when King Richard is absent fighting off in the Crusades. Alright, but before I go completely insane talking about some of the weirder parts of the show, let me just say the animation in this show is actually really gorgeous for an anime made in 1990, and the action scenes are really fluid, the character designs are really expressive as you would expect in an anime, and they nailed that medieval atmosphere with the background. Like, just look at that. And the music is actually such a banger, especially the opening theme. It's like become one of my favorite openings, and it's such a certified classic. It's got that perfect mix of adventure, heroism, and just that little bit of 90s anime cheesiness that I love. But the soundtrack in general really sells the epic, dramatic tone of the show, making every moment feel just a little bit more intense than it probably should be. And these are the two different versions of the opening, the Japanese and American version, but here you go. Just bask in its glory.
Come along if you can to join a merry band. Fight on and never lose.
Alright, now let's get on to the part that makes this show legendary. The completely unhinged moments. I mean, this show starts off as a fairly grounded medieval adventure, but as it goes on, things just get really wild. Like, we've got Robin Hood and his outlaws riding a tank, Baron Alwine, who's actually so over-the-top evil that I'm pretty sure that he's practiced his maniacal laugh in the mirror, and oh yeah, there's a UFO at one point. Just no explanation, just a UFO in the middle of medieval England. Like, what? But let's talk about that one scene. At one point, Robin Alwine, why do I keep calling him Robin Alwine? Maybe he is a Robin. I don't know. But anyways, Baron Alwine, in his never-ending quest for power, he tries to steal the so-called Treasure of the Forest, a mystical artifact called the Spear of Eternal Life. Things immediately go sideways, and the tree that's been guarding the treasure just straight up comes alive and starts attacking everyone. Not just Alwine and the corrupt bishop, but he also attacks Robin and his allies. Then out of nowhere, the golden cross of Lancaster that Marion gave Robin starts glowing and activates some kind of ancient power, summoning a gigantic tree of light, half the size of Earth. Just look at that. At this point, I was getting serious Evangelion vibes. I'm not sure if you guys know Evangelion, but it's like one of the best animes out there. And this thing looks like the third impact, which is... It's a major spoiler in the show, so I'm not gonna go very deep into it. But like, both of them are like glowing and low-key existential, but we're not even done. And in this scene, suddenly Robin, Marion, and Gilbert and Cleo are just floating in space without clothes, inside of a glowing bubble with like fairies flying around. Like, what the hell is happening? But seriously, this scene just kept reminding me of Neon Genesis Evangelion, so naturally I started thinking, did this show inspire Evangelion? I mean, look at these two scenes, don't they look so similar, or at least slightly inspired? But no, I actually did a little bit of research, and it turns out it's actually the same exact studio that made Evangelion, that made Robin Hood, so I guess this was their way of getting a little bit weird before they went on to make anime history just 5 years later. And just when you think it can't get even more surreal, a divine voice speaks to Robin. It tells him, "You are being reborn." And then it drops some kind of deep philosophical message about how Robin must show people that they must protect, help them see the beauty around them, and treat the universe that created them like a mother and love it. Sounds seriously religious, right? So is Robin Hood a messiah now? Is this some kind of religious allegory? Or is it just like a really deep environmental message about protecting nature? Honestly, I have no idea what the studio or the directors were thinking, but it's one of the most unexpected things to come out of an anime about Robin Hood. But yeah, to wrap this up, Robin Hood no Daiboken is an absolute ride. It's got fantastic animation, a great soundtrack, and a surprisingly deep story with emotional character moments. Plus, there's just enough ridiculousness to keep things entertaining. But compared to Tom and Jerry and Robin Hood the Dark Forest, I would give this a solid B tier. It's a fun and unique take on the legend, even though it occasionally goes completely off the rails.
On to the Tom and Jerry movie. Released in 2012 and directed by Spike Brandt and Tony Cravone, who also direct other animated media such as Tom and Jerry, The Nutcracker Tale, and Scooby-Doo. This movie can be described as Tom and Jerry in the world of Robin Hood. As such, the premise compared to other Robin Hood films more or less stays the same. King Richard is off to the Crusades, but his nefarious brother, Prince John, and his cunning right-hand man, the Sheriff of Nottingham, usurp the throne for themselves. In response, Robin Hood and his merry men, whom Jerry is a part of, defends the rightful rule of King Richard, whilst also distributing the wealth they stole from the prince's tax convoys back to the people. This classic story of wealth redistribution is one of the first scenes in the movie. Other Robin Hood tales and themes also appear. Maid Marian and Robin Hood are secretly in love. Robin is enticed to participate in the shooting match, though he is unfortunately taken prisoner once his identity is revealed. And King Richard's return is met with Prince John attempting to assassinate him. This adherence to the source material makes it the most accurate adaptation of the three pieces of media that we are reviewing. Let's talk about the characters. You might be wondering how Tom and Jerry play into this. I dare say their inclusion is almost natural. Jerry is a secret messenger between Robin and Maid Marian, relaying love poems and intelligence reports alike. Tom is tasked with capturing Jerry so that the sheriff may find out, once and for all, who the spy is in the court. Other characters from Tom and Jerry appear as well, all on the side of either King John the Bear or Robin Hood's merry men, Spike, Tyke, and Friar Droopy. They are almost more important than the traditional merry men, Little John, Friar Tuck, and Will Scarlet, as demonstrated when they rescued the captured Robin Hood and his men from Prince John's castle. This is viewed as mostly positive, with the writers putting their spin on the original story.
Speaking of Prince John, this guy loves money. It's played up so much to the point that he almost seems inept. like in the Disney adaptation. However, he is not a useless thumbsucker. Alongside a sheriff, he concocts the plot to capture Robin Hood, as well as the conspiracy to assassinate King Richard when he is making landfall in England. He almost succeeds on both occasions, only to be foiled by Jerry Mouse and Tom. Most Robin Hood stories uphold certain values: friendship, camaraderie, loyalty, truth, fairness, justice, and bravery. The Tom and Jerry movie is no exception. Jerry, while small, is brave against the usurper, Prince John, holding him off long enough for Robin and King Richard to escape their trap. Tom, once he finds out the truth that King Richard is alive and that Prince John is attempting to kill him, renounces his allegiance to the sheriff and joins with Robin. The merry men are always at Robin's side, even when he isn't sure of himself. Given that it is an animated children's movie, we should expect a lot of singing. There were a total of 4 songs, 1 for the start of the movie, 2 for the middle, and 1 for the very end. We thought that they were alright, and certainly not detracting from the movie. The second song was pretty good, in our opinion. The other thing with children's movies is that they have a lot of humor. We found the humor to be alright. The 2 running gags that hit the hardest were Prince John's love for money and the poking with swords gag. Tom and Jerry antics are a classic, no doubt about that. Onto the bad, which we can confidently say there is only one of, far less in the Dark Forest. That being Maid Marian's design. It is quite something. For a children's animated movie, they did not have to go all out for her. It's actually kind of concerning and out of place. In conclusion, the Tom and Jerry movie is undoubtedly the most accurate Robin Hood adaptation out of the 3 that we have reviewed. It perfectly blends creativity concerning the source material, and the inclusion of Tom and Jerry characters does nothing but add depth and quality to the story. Given its short length, under an hour, the movie is equally enjoyable for those watching for the first time, as well as those teeming with nostalgia. Given these characteristics, we're going to place Tom and Jerry movie at S tier. It is just a really good movie. With that being said, that's the end of our tier list. That was a lot of information for just 3 pieces of media. As we said before, The Dark Forest is a really bad movie, objectively and subjectively. Worst of all, it's just vaguely about Robin Hood. The only perhaps good part about it was how willing the producers and the studio were to go ahead with this wacky idea of a movie. F tier doesn't even do it justice. Let's give it a waste of digital space out of 10. On the other hand, Anime Hood reminded me of a classic 90s anime and did a better job at creating an interesting plot while keeping true to the traditional Robin Hood stories and values. But some parts of the show were chaotic and insane for a Robin Hood story, resulting in a B ranking for this rendition. But more accurately, we'll give it a "the animators were on something" out of 10. Finally, the Tom and Jerry Robin Hood was objectively peak. From top-tier humor to a classic nostalgic feel of the original Tom and Jerry stories everyone knows and loves. I would 100% recommend this movie and would rate it an S tier or even an awesome use of time out of 10. That draws this video to a close. Thank you for watching, make sure to like and subscribe.